All right, well, I'm back. It's literally the same day, same space that I just created the previous episode. But as I said in the previous episode, I'm about to create more than I consume. So here we are again. What are y'all on? Let me go see what these cats got on. Well, they're just doing their normal fighting with each other. But yeah, so I am super excited because I am planning a trip for my son and I, and it's been a very long time since we've taken a trip together. I don't know why I let them in my room, to be honest. They're such a distraction. But we used to travel the world together. I would be quick to pick up and go anywhere, especially if things weren't going my way. Of course, the problem solution is just to get away. But that never worked. The problems always seem to follow me. So I'm just very excited because I feel like this is going to be a great time. It's going to be an incredible time. Most of the trips that we've taken before in the past, even like our first big one, when he turned 3, no, he turned 3 and I turned 24, maybe? I think that's how it goes. But anyways, our first major trip, we went on a cruise to the Bahamas, and your girl wasn't in the best space during that time. I'd actually gotten the money from an equal opportunity of employment case that I fought after some really wild things that happened in the workplace. I was working as an assistant property manager, and there were some happenings between the manager of the property and I, and he was treated better as a result than I was. So I kind of fought that and I won, and I ended up receiving a large lump sum of money behind that case, and I used that money to invest in my real estate business at the time and take us on a trip, take us on our first trip to the Bahamas. Oh my gosh, what are y'all on? There have been other trips that we've taken that have been great. I mean, every trip that we've taken pretty much has been an incredible time, but just thinking back on the happenings or the reason we were taking that trip or the means that we had or just where my mental was during that time, it was never like the best scenario. Another trip that I hold dear to my heart is when we went to Virginia and we went and saw 116 Click, Lecrae, Andy Manil, KB, Thistle. I mean, everybody was there. It was so incredible, and we had VIP tickets, so we were able to meet them, ask questions. Just, it was literally like one of the most memorable times of our lives. My son got to go up on stage and turn up with them. It was just like so great. But I was going to Virginia because I had court, and it just so happened that the tour was going to be in Virginia the same weekend that I had court. So we just made a trip out of my court date. So it's just incredible to think that this time the means, it came from God, okay? God has been providing. Oh my goodness. Like I am just so grateful. I'm so grateful. I think I've shared in previous episodes from last year, like I really have not worked since May of last year, for real. And God has just been providing over and abundantly, you know? And I'll attribute that mostly because I was raised to tithe. Like, trust God with what you have and watch him do more than you could have done with it. And it's a continued proven method. Thank God for my grandparents, you know? They taught me so many things. Before I get back into the trip, speaking of grandparents, my grandmother came to visit me a couple days ago. She lives about an hour and 45 minutes south of where I live. And I love that woman. I love every time that I have with her and just the knowledge that she shares. She's incredible. We often play games together, board games, Scrabble, chess. We used to play Yahtzee together. Even now we'll do like iMessage chess. And I just love my grandma. We have a really incredible relationship. But what I love most about her is the fact that she planted so many seeds of Christ in me, her and my grandfather growing up. My grandfather was a missionary, international actually. So he began a missionary project here in Indiana and had several different locations, and then ventured off to Guatemala, Zimbabwe, and I'm pretty sure there were some other locations, but those were the main locations while I was living with them that he would travel to. So yeah, I just grew up in a very, okay, I digress. Thank you, God. Thank you, Holy Spirit. This is a moment to really, really ponder on, because up until this year, I used to say like, oh, my parents neglected me. Oh, you know, why didn't they love me? Why weren't they with me? Why didn't they make a space that was safe for me and make sure that I felt loved and wanted and all these things? And I would have all these pleas with God. And this year, he said, baby girl, think about it. And no shade to my parents, because I love them both and respect them both, but would you really want to be raised by them? Like, aren't you glad that I saved you? I love y'all. If my mama and dad are listening, I love y'all. Y'all got y'all issues just like me. And some of us is really willing to work in more areas than the others. I'm not putting up no Richter scale at all. But I do know when God gave me that revelation, when he said you really wanted to be raised that way, I said, you know what, Lord, I will not dare fix my lips to complain about anything that you've taken me through, because there is a purpose. There is a greater purpose. His ways are not our ways. They are far above our ways. And I'm just so grateful. I am so grateful, seriously. So when my grandma came to visit, she was actually here because my mom went into the hospital for something. She's okay, thank God. But she went into the hospital for something, so my grandma came up to visit her, and then on her way home, she stopped by here so we could have lunch together and just sit and talk. And when I tell you, we had the most incredible time. Like, I'll just share a few things because there's so much, but the three biggest takeaways from my time with my grandmother, and then I'll get back to the trip. One was, it doesn't matter how old you are. My grandma was 81 years old, and she's like sharing with me the ways that she and my grandfather are still growing individually and in the spirit and collectively. And it was just so beautiful to hear, you know, her vulnerabilities and her transparency. And I won't share details, but it's real stuff. And some things that maybe even stem from childhood or just experiences that we have going through life that we don't even realize affect us so drastically. And we just go on treating other people as if they are the same people from our past. And it's so unfair, and it's room for growth for everybody. And I just love that. I love that because my grandma, I love her. I love her, okay? She ain't no saint, for real, for real. She's the closest to a saint that I maybe met, but she got some ways to her too. But I love the fact that she was just raw and open and honest about her ways. I don't feel like I've had a moment with her like that ever. Not to say that she puts on this persona that she's perfect, but in a way, people do. People do. It's human in us to hide our flaws. So that was just a beautiful, beautiful spiritual moment for her to be opening up and sharing with me. And I cherish that. I appreciate that she let me in such close proximity, because we've had a rough decade, I'll say. Which leads me into the next point. I had gotten upset with pretty much my whole entire family because they had words to say about me choosing to strip, because I thought that was just like my only way out. Like, oh, this is the only way I could provide for my son right now. I have to do this. And everybody kind of like freaked out. They're like, you know, you weren't raised like this. What are you doing? And kind of condemning me in a way. And my reaction was super defensive, super hateful, super mean. I even got on Facebook and I was like, airing out our family's business. I'm like, how are y'all talking about this when we have this going on, or we had this going on, and nobody batted an eye about it, but y'all worried about how I'm feeding my son? And I was just irate at the time. And me and my grandma, we had choice words with one another. They weren't very kind on either end. And so this space together, it was really, really great for the both of us, I believe. So I had wrote letters to a couple of family members that I felt had wronged me, and I followed lead, and I continued in wrongdoings. Again, I was very defensive. I wanted revenge. I wanted justice for myself. I was doing God's job, and I was not doing it very well because I never felt better with anything that I did. Like, maybe for a moment, maybe it was like, oh, I got it out there. But it never really did what it was supposed to do until I gave it to God. So when I gave it to him, he gave it back to me, and he prompted me to write these letters and extending forgiveness, but also seeking forgiveness for my unforgiveness. And I would love to get into that in another episode because there are a lot of layers to that. But it was incredible. So the first batch of letters, I had sent to my grandma because I didn't have the other family members' addresses. And so she sent them back to me, and she gave me their addresses and was like, hey, I think it's appropriate to come from you. But she also was like, you know, consider this, because in my apology, I was very vague. I didn't say like exactly what I was sorry for. I just was like, you know, hey, I'm sorry for being unforgiving and evil and rude and this, that, and the third. And my grandma suggested that I be more specific in my actions. And I was with her. I'm like, hey, no problem. I love advice. I love to grow. So many people feel like they know everything, and so they get defensive when people try to tell them something. I was people. And you just don't grow. Like, you close yourself off to so much opportunity by putting up that defense and thinking that somebody's trying to tell you, like, God's trying to tell you, you better listen, okay? So I be listening. And sometimes God will tell me, no, that's not what you want to listen to, but still listen, so you know not to do something. But that wasn't the case here. I was like, okay, let me rewrite it. So I rewrote it, and I felt really, really good about it. Rewrote all the letters and was like, all right, can I do one more? I'm like, do I want to do one more coat? I'm painting my nails right now. If you're watching me on YouTube, you can see, but if you're listening to me on Spotify, you're probably like, what? One more coat? I digress. So when she came to visit my mom and then stopped by to see me on her way home, she was like, I don't know how to say this without offending you. And I love her for that, because she knows I used to be the defense mechanism lady. Like, I'll get offended quickly and have a reason why I'm right and why you're not. But thank God for deliverance. Amen. Bad girl gone good. So I was like, Grandma, you could say it. You won't offend me. I promise you. I'm living in the spirit. I'm living a blessed life. It really ain't nothing nobody could say to offend me at this point. Okay? If it ain't come from God, it's not really relevant, to be honest. And God is not a God of offense. So there's that. So she was like, you know, my aunt, one of the family members, had called her when she received my letter and was like, hey, I really liked the letter until she got to the part where she said she forgives me. And I was like, So my grandma proceeds to say, she did a forgiveness workshop long ago. And in that workshop, she learned that if a person does not see where they have wronged you, or they have not sought out forgiveness from you, don't tell them that you forgive them, because they are going to take offense to it. They aren't going to receive it because they don't think they did anything wrong. So they feel like, what you forgiving me for? I didn't do nothing. And I was like, wow, you're right. And it even made me think about a recent situation with my mom. I had reached out to her and I was like, hey, I'm choosing to forgive you for this. Can we just make it better going forward? And I was like, I probably didn't have to say that to her either. If you are going to forgive somebody void of their apology, remember they ain't gave you, it's void of their apology. So what you doing it externally for? Just do it internally. you're basically making up an apology in your mind, right? Because they never apologized, but you're making up in their mind that they're sorry. They don't know any better. So also make up in your mind only that you are forgiving them. You don't have to do it audibly. So she basically was like, yeah, my aunt was like, oh, it ruined everything else in the letter. And it was a punch in the gut for her when I said that I choose to forgive her. And I just told my grandma, well, that's something she got to take up with God. I don't take no offense. Trust me, because I know where my heart was. I know my heart posture right now. And I meant well in that. And if she can't receive that, again, that's something that she's going to have to take up with God. But I don't know if it'll be BG3. I don't know if it'll be the books that I read. I don't know if it'll be a connection that I make networking. I don't know if it'll be my son. But I know God is calling me to hire. He's calling us to hire. And I'm getting in line with it. So my family's going to see me on the TV one day. My family's going to hear about me doing book signings. My family's going to hear about me on the radio and in all of these different lights sharing the gospel of Christ. And I don't want them to be able to say, well, but she still harbors unforgiveness, or she still, you know, she did this and she never apologized. Like, no, there's no stone unturned. You know, the worst of the worst I thought that happened to me, I forgave. I let go. I'm going to let the next 30 years of my life act like that didn't even happen. Like, unless it comes up in a conversation and it's necessary, then Christ will allow me to divulge. But it literally consumed me my entire life up until the past couple of years. And I will not allow it to have any more of me going forward. So that was my final step in really just releasing it. Like, will it be a part of a book? Maybe, I don't know, but it's not my focus. It was my focus for so long. Like, oh, I'm this way because of this, like blaming everything that I went through. And hey, you gotta take accountability. You gotta take responsibility at some point, baby. It is so freeing. It feels so good. It feels so good. It feels so good to take accountability. So when my grandma and we had that conversation, I was like, hey, you know, going forward, I will definitely take that into consideration. Thank you for sharing that with me. But yeah, as far as this situation goes, it is what it is. She got to take that up with God. And then the final thing, and this is, I'm going to cry. I'm probably going to cry talking about this one because this is some real life, like spiritual warfare type stuff. If I've never seen it before, I saw it when my grandma came. And I know I've seen it before, but this was on a whole different level than I have seen it before. So there's still quite a bit of snow and ice in my apartment complex. Like in the parking lot, they haven't done a very good job of shoveling or putting salt down in the parking area. So I was looking out for my grandma when she came so that I could go down and walk her up. Again, the woman's 81 years old. Not to say that she needed my help, but I'm not about to let my grandmother walk through all this ice and snow by herself, period. And I hope y'all wouldn't either. So I went to go help her up. And when it was time for her to leave, I did the same. Helped her out. And gave her a hug before she got in the car. She grabbed both of my hands and she just shared with me how much she appreciates our relationship. And, you know, I reciprocated that. And hold on before I get into this, because this is really, really important and I wanted to share it. Something that I told her while she was here before I walked her down was there's 3 lessons that she taught me, her and my grandfather, but mostly her, because our relationship, you know, grandma, granddaughter, I'm sure, but I love my grandpa. Okay, I said, y'all taught me there's no better place than the presence of God. And I've seen that to be true time and time and time again. Said y'all also taught me that if you tithe, you'll need for nothing. And I've seen that come true time and time and time again. I said this last lesson, it was tough for me to learn. It was really, really difficult for me to learn, but I'm so glad that you taught it to me, because now that I'm applying it, I wish I would have applied it sooner. Forgiveness. You gotta forgive immediately. I remember I had caught a battery case, and I know we're going to bring it back around, but I had caught a battery case while I was pregnant with my son, and I was living with my grandparents at the time. Well, actually, I was living with the person that I caught the battery case on. but they didn't live too far from my grandmother. So whenever the whole ordeal happened, I ended up going to stay with my grandparents for a little while. And my grandma was really encouraging is not a strong enough word. She was almost forcing me to forgive this lady. And I was like, I don't want to. And especially she didn't say sorry. I'm not sorry. She should be sorry. She's not even sorry. So she was, giving me scripture and just telling me why it was so important for me to forgive. And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. She's like, it doesn't matter. You're not ever going to be ready. Just forgive. And I didn't understand it. Like, I could literally remember this time in my life. And I don't have a lot of memories, so that's incredible. But yeah, I get it now. I get it. Forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person. You don't want to harbor that unforgiveness and negativity and seeking revenge, because we're all human. And if we have not forgiven somebody, there's something in us that still wants them to feel what we felt or to acknowledge what we have felt. So I shared with her those 3 things. So as I'm walking her out and she grabs my hands and she's being very sentimental and the sun is shining on us, and she's literally sharing with me all the times that she appreciates how when my son was first born, we lived with him as well. And she was just remembering how precious he was. And she was like, he would throw up on you all the time, but he was so precious. And it's true. So as I walked away from her in that moment, the enemy tried to plant a seed in my mind and say, oh yeah, that would be a great last memory with your grandma now, wouldn't it? And immediately, because I'm operating in the spirit, I can't even give myself credit. It's just because I've literally been allowing God to have his way with me, and not entirely. There's still some areas that I need to hand over to the Lord, but I've allowed him to have way more than ever before. So we started, and we're still going. So in that moment, I immediately began to pray, to go into spiritual warfare, and rebuked the thought that had happened. I was like, no way, like, my grandma's going to be safe. And, the enemy's trying to put it in my mind, like, maybe she'll get into an accident and this, that, and the third. I'm like, no, my grandma was fine. Everything's fine. Started praying in the spirit, in tongues, and on my way up, even when I got in the apartment, it was just making myself, I mentioned this on the last episode, making myself think positive. It's a war. It is literally a war. So I had to go help my pastor run a few errands. And while I was waiting on him at one of the places we went, I had texted my grandma. And I was like, hey, did you make it back yet? And a few minutes later, after my pastor had got back in the car, she calls. And she says, Sierra, I've been in an accident. And immediately I just froze. I froze. I'm not gonna lie, I froze. And she said, this guy ran a stop sign. The police are on their way. Grandpa said to call the ambulance because my chest hurts. So I'm gonna call an ambulance, but I wanted to let you know. And could you please let me know? Okay. Sorry about that. So, as I was saying, thank God my pastor was with me. Immediately after I got off the phone with my grandmother, she said, she's okay. She didn't need me to come. They got everything worked out. So, my pastor prays immediately. Thank God. Like, what are the odds? Come on. I needed that because I was shook. And after he prayed and I prayed and pondered, God said, wake up. He said, don't allow this to shake you up. Just wake you up. And I said, okay. So spiritual warfare is real. And I'm not saying that my prayers are the reason that my grandma is still here today. God is the reason why my grandma is still here today. I believe that even if I would have negated going into spiritual warfare when the enemy put that in my mind, God still would have spared my grandmother. Because I don't think that it's about me at all. But I know he can use you. My pastor said you can be the wire. And so make sure you're a good wire. And I'm going to go back to the trip. Come off of this and go back to the trip, and we're going to close. But that was some real spiel Holyfield stuff. Like, when you operate in the spirit, you are accountable. And my pastor also says often, don't let anybody's blood be on your hands. And so when he's calling you to pray for somebody, when he's calling you to reach out to somebody, when he's calling you to do anything, you ought to do it. It can be a matter between life and death. And again, I'm not saying that the situation was such. I don't know. I do know one thing. I feel, well, I don't know this. I feel like when we get to heaven, when we make it, those of us that do and want to, God is going to show us some footage of our lives and show us all the ways in which he protected us that we had no knowledge of because of our carnal and fleshly vision. We weren't able to even recognize what was happening for real. So shout out to God for his infinite protection, even when we're clueless, even when we're disobedient. I'm just so grateful. And I don't want to be clueless. I don't want to be disobedient. I would rather level up. Like, I would rather give myself a higher chance of success in life by following the creator of such than going, again, down these proven methods that only aid in death, essentially. Shoot, destruction first, but, you know, death comes after destruction. So, back to the trip, and I'm gonna hop on off of here, get ready to go to church. I'm really looking forward to it. Like, I'm really looking forward to spending some time with my son together. We have not traveled together in forever. We've really been put. I think we went to New Orleans with my sister and nieces last year, and that was fun. But somewhere where it's been just the both of us, it's been a while. And I think it's necessary. He's about to be 13, my baby. Last trip with like youth. He's gonna be a teenager now. He's still youth, but you know what I mean. So really looking forward to that. I'm sure by the time I drop this episode that we'll have already went. So look out for the next episode and me telling you the revelations that God revealed to us on our trip. So much love, much peace. I'll see you next time, BG3.